The man at the center of one of the most audacious airport theft operations in history is Vincent Leclerc, a name now whispered in security circles as both a genius and a ghost. Born in Lyon, France in 1985, Vincent didn't grow up in poverty, nor was he subjected to the kind of trauma that typically shapes the life of a career criminal. Instead, he was always a curious child, quiet but brilliant, with an exceptional ability to observe, analyze, and remember details that others missed. His teachers noticed his gift for numbers and puzzles early on, and by the time he was in high school, he was already writing simple computer programs and disassembling electronics just to understand how they worked. Vincent's father was an airline technician, which meant frequent visits to airport terminals and access to stories from behind the scenes. This early exposure to the inner workings of airport logistics left a lasting impression. While most children were fascinated by the planes, Vincent was intrigued by the systems, baggage movement, employee shifts, and the complex network of checkpoints. Airports to him were not just travel hubs, they were puzzles waiting to be solved. In university, he studied computer science and engineering. At the same time, he developed an interest in social engineering and behavioral psychology. He became fascinated by how easily people trusted those in uniforms, or those who looked like they belonged. During this time, he began running small-scale scams, not for money at first, but for the thrill. He would gain unauthorized access to restricted areas just to prove that he could. The rush of bypassing security, even without taking anything, planted the seed for what would become his biggest operation. The idea to target airports for theft came during a visit to Charles de Gaulle Airport while shadowing his father on a maintenance job. Vincent observed how vast the airport was, how busy and chaotic. Amidst the constant movement of staff and passengers, he noticed something crucial: a lack of cross-departmental oversight. Ground crews, maintenance, security, catering, each had separate operations, uniforms, and entry points. He realized that with the right credentials and a convincing outfit, a person could easily move between departments without raising suspicion. Over the next few years, Vincent began meticulously researching airport operations across Europe and eventually the United States. He read internal reports, interviewed former employees under false pretenses, and studied blueprints of terminal layouts. His attention to detail was unmatched. He learned which airports outsourced their security, which ones had outdated surveillance systems, and which had the highest volume of untracked cash transfers, usually through duty-free sales, vending operations, and cash-heavy airport businesses. The final push came when he successfully tested his theory in a small regional airport in Belgium. Dressed as a baggage handler, he walked into a secure area, removed a cash deposit bag from an unattended cart, and left without anyone noticing. No alarms were triggered. No one followed. The money wasn't large, just under 10,000 euros, but the test proved his theory. Airports were vulnerable. Vincent then began to build his operation, carefully selecting airports based on specific vulnerabilities. He crafted multiple identities, acquired fake uniforms, and even studied the accents and mannerisms of local staff to blend in. For 2 years, he executed a series of thefts across major international airports, stealing small but frequent sums of cash that ultimately added up to nearly $4 million. Each job was precise, clean, and left authorities baffled. Vincent Leclerc wasn't just stealing money, he was outsmarting entire systems designed to prevent exactly that, and for 2 years, no one even knew his name. Vincent Leclerc's $4 million airport heist wasn't a single dramatic robbery. It was a series of meticulously planned and executed operations spread over 2 years and across multiple countries. His genius lay in subtlety. Rather than drawing attention with violence or flashy tactics, Vincent operated like a shadow, unnoticed, untraceable, and always one step ahead. His approach combined high-level social engineering, advanced tech skills, and a deep understanding of airport systems. Step 1. Target selection and reconnaissance. Vincent's operation began with careful airport selection. He prioritized busy international airports with complex structures, outsourced operations, and high-foot traffic. These conditions made it easier for him to blend in and for his movements to go unnoticed. He used online job boards, LinkedIn, and airport employee forums to gather intel. From there, he would spend weeks studying terminal layouts, employee entry points, uniform styles, shift rotations, and cash transport routines. He even booked flights at target airports under false names just to observe ground operations firsthand. While waiting for flights, he would track money transport routes, study where cash from food courts and duty-free shops was taken, and time the intervals between pickups. Step 2. Creating identities and disguises. Vincent created multiple fake identities, each supported by forged documents and matching uniforms. He posed as baggage handlers, janitors, catering crew, maintenance workers, and even low-ranking security staff. He bought real uniforms online from secondhand suppliers or replicated them after close observation. Each disguise was tailored down to minute details: badges, name tags, gloves, even the right shoes. His psychological insight helped him copy the posture and attitude of workers in each role. He knew that confidence and familiarity were key. By walking with purpose and carrying props like clipboards or toolboxes, he never gave security a reason to question him. Step 3. Infiltrating secure areas. Using stolen access cards, duplicated ID badges, and occasionally bribed insiders, Vincent entered staff-only zones without triggering suspicion. He exploited a common airport flaw: departments operated in silos. A janitor from one area could go unnoticed in another as long as they looked the part. Airport security personnel rarely cross-verified credentials between departments. Vincent also used social engineering to bypass certain checks. For instance, he once posed as an IT technician responding to a system error in a retail shop. While the staff were distracted, he accessed their cash drawer and took a small amount, just enough to avoid immediate detection. Step 4. Stealing the cash. Vincent never targeted bank vaults or armored trucks. Instead, he siphoned money from daily operations: cash deposits from food vendors, vending machine collectors, and duty-free tills that were often collected and stored in less secure locations before being moved. He would watch where the cash bags were stored temporarily, usually in office safes or drop boxes, and slip in during moments of low activity. He timed his thefts during shift changes, lunch breaks, or when employees were distracted by customer flow. The amounts stolen were often under $50,000 per job, small enough to delay internal audits, but frequent enough to accumulate millions over time. Step 5. Covering his tracks. Vincent used burner phones, anonymized online searches, and never visited the same airport twice within a short time. He changed identities and appearance often, and even traveled internationally between jobs to confuse jurisdiction tracking. He stored the stolen money in offshore accounts, crypto wallets, and even converted some into physical assets like gold and artwork. Because the thefts appeared isolated and minor at first, airport authorities chalked them up to internal mishandling or employee theft. By the time investigators began to suspect a larger pattern, Vincent had already completed over 40 heists across 11 airports in 6 countries. He didn't just steal money, he exposed the systemic weaknesses of the airport industry. And for 2 years, no camera caught his face, no fingerprint was traced, and no name appeared on any wanted list. He was the ghost in the system. Vincent Leclerc's ability to evade capture for 2 years wasn't just luck. It was the result of methodical planning, obsessive attention to detail, and an intuitive understanding of how both people and systems work. He didn't rely on brute force or risky confrontations. Instead, he used patience, deception, and a rotating toolkit of identities to remain invisible. While law enforcement agencies scrambled for answers, Vincent was always one step ahead, blending into the chaos of the very systems designed to catch people like him. Master of disguise and identity rotation. One of Vincent's most powerful tools was his mastery of disguise. He never used the same identity twice at the same airport. With a wardrobe that included over a dozen airport staff uniforms, from janitorial coveralls to baggage handler vests and technician jumpsuits, he could reinvent himself in seconds. He even learned different accents and regional slang to better impersonate local workers. Each identity came with forged documents, work badges, and props that made him indistinguishable from legitimate employees. Many of these IDs were created using real employee details he gathered from online data breaches or phishing scams. Because his appearances were short, targeted, and confident, he never aroused suspicion. Technological camouflage. Vincent also knew how to avoid digital footprints. He used burner phones and encrypted messaging apps that changed frequently. When planning jobs, he relied on virtual private networks, VPNs, the dark web, and anonymized search engines to keep his research untraceable. He avoided using credit cards, booking flights under his real name, or staying in traceable hotels. Instead, he often stayed in short-term rentals booked through third parties or used cash to check into small, independently run hostels. To further throw off surveillance, Vincent carried devices that jammed or scrambled radio signals. These low-range jammers could temporarily disrupt security camera feeds or RFID badge readers just long enough to slip through unnoticed. At some airports, he even hacked into exposed Wi-Fi networks to monitor internal communications and plan his moves in real time. Psychological warfare. Vincent's understanding of human behavior was one of his greatest assets. He knew that most people don't question what they expect to see. An airport worker in uniform, walking with a clipboard and an annoyed look, rarely gets a second glance. He used this to his advantage, projecting authority or urgency to bypass routine checks. Security guards often let him through simply because he looked like he belonged. He also exploited the shift culture in airports. He struck during times of confusion, shift changes, late-night hours, or during system glitches. He timed his entries and exits to coincide with employee breaks or handovers, knowing those were the moments when no one would be watching closely. Why it took so long to catch on the brilliance of Vincent's operation was that each theft on its own seemed minor. He never took enough to cause panic, just enough to go unnoticed for weeks or months. Most missing funds were written off as accounting errors or internal employee theft. Because he operated across borders and airports, no single police department had a complete picture of the crimes. There was no immediate pattern, no recognizable suspect, and no forensic trail. It wasn't until a private airport security firm began linking subtle patterns, like the timing of the thefts and similarities in the method, that suspicions of a serial operator emerged. Even then, without a face or a name, law enforcement had nothing concrete to act on. Vincent's real genius was in understanding the gaps, not just in airport security, but in the way bureaucracies communicate. He didn't hide in shadows, he hid in plain sight, inside the cracks of a disconnected system. And for 2 years, the world had no idea he even existed. For 2 years, Vincent Leclerc danced between borders, stole millions from under the noses of authorities, and vanished without a trace. But even the most elusive criminal can't stay invisible forever. His downfall, ironically, began not with a mistake in his methods, but with a stroke of overconfidence and one miscalculated risk in an unfamiliar airport. The capture, a misstep in Madrid. In late 2023, Vincent set his sights on Madrid-Barajas Airport, Spain's busiest. It was supposed to be a routine job, small cash pickups from airport cafes and vending collections. But this time, Vincent underestimated recent upgrades to the airport's surveillance systems. Unknown to him, the Spanish government had recently installed high-resolution facial recognition cameras across all terminals as part of an anti-terrorism initiative. Though he had changed his disguise and ID, Vincent made the critical mistake of reusing a facial prosthetic previously caught in low-res CCTV footage at another European airport. The software flagged a match with that footage and silently alerted Interpol. Vincent was unaware that authorities were monitoring him until plainclothes officers detained him near a service corridor. At the time of arrest, he carried no weapons and offered no resistance. Authorities recovered €48,000 in unmarked cash and a set of forged credentials. His multiple identities made processing him difficult, but after weeks of cross-border investigation, French authorities confirmed his real identity. News of the ghost thief being caught went viral. Vincent was charged with multiple counts of grand theft, identity fraud, and unlawful access to restricted areas across 6 countries. He was eventually sentenced to 16 years in a maximum security prison in southern France. Life in prison. Calm before the storm. Inside prison, Vincent maintained the same composure he had while committing his crimes. He read constantly, avoided trouble, and kept to himself. But what no one realized was that his mind had already moved on to his next plan: escape. From the moment he arrived, Vincent began studying the prison's routines. He noted guard shifts, blind spots in surveillance, and the timing of cell checks. He made himself invisible to staff, polite, quiet, never disruptive. He gained the trust of a few low-risk inmates and bartered favors for small items like wire, plastic, and batteries. Using these tools and knowledge he had honed as an engineer, he constructed a makeshift lockpick hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Over the next several months, he tested it discreetly during cleaning shifts and recreational periods. The escape, a plan executed with precision. The real opportunity came during a scheduled maintenance of the prison's plumbing system. Knowing the workers would enter through a secured maintenance tunnel that connected to the lower levels of the prison, Vincent faked a severe stomach illness and got himself assigned to the infirmary wing, closest to the tunnel access point. On the day of the escape, while a maintenance worker stepped away from his tools, Vincent, wearing a stolen uniform, slipped into the tunnel system with his lockpick. He navigated the underground passages, which he had memorized by observing blueprint fragments during a prior janitorial detail. By the time guards realized something was wrong, he was already outside the outer fence, having used a forged ID badge and an emergency exit point that hadn't triggered alarms due to a malfunction he had subtly caused days earlier. Aftermath. Vincent vanished into the French countryside without leaving a trace. Security agencies across Europe launched a manhunt, placing him on most wanted lists and issuing bulletins to airports and border crossings. But no confirmed sightings have emerged since. Some say he fled to a non-extradition country under a new identity. Others believe he used his remaining fortune to disappear permanently. What's certain is that Vincent Leclerc not only outsmarted some of the world's most secure airports, he also outwitted a maximum security prison. Once again, the ghost had slipped away. Vincent Leclerc's escape from prison sent shockwaves through international law enforcement and aviation security communities. Authorities were already embarrassed by how long he had operated undetected across multiple airports, but his successful prison break, executed without violence or chaos, was a final insult to the systems designed to contain him. After the escape, Vincent disappeared completely, leaving behind no digital footprint, no financial trail, and no verifiable sightings. It was as if he had dissolved into thin air, just as he had done so many times before. Is he still on the run? Yes, and he remains one of the most wanted fugitives in Europe. Within 24 hours of his escape, Interpol issued a red notice and circulated his face, known aliases, and fingerprints to over 190 countries. France offered a substantial reward for information leading to his capture, and airports around the world were put on high alert. Yet, despite this massive effort, there has not been a single confirmed sighting. Investigators believe Vincent prepared for the escape long in advance. It's suspected he had a pre-planned safe house, a clean identity, and access to resources, including some of the stolen money that was never recovered. A few intelligence analysts theorize that he may have fled to a non-extradition country like Russia, Iran, or parts of Africa, where law enforcement cooperation is limited. Others speculate he may have assumed an entirely new identity and started a low-profile life somewhere in South America or Southeast Asia. There have been scattered rumors: a blurry security cam image in Brazil, a man with a French accent seen living off-grid in Thailand, a former associate claiming he received an encrypted message months after the escape. But none of these leads have been confirmed. In the eyes of the law, Vincent Leclerc remains at large, and very likely alive. Impact on airport security. The aftermath of Vincent's crimes had a dramatic impact on airport security protocols worldwide. His case exposed gaping holes in airport operations, particularly in how different departments operated in isolation. For years, security systems had focused on passengers, not internal threats from individuals posing as staff. Vincent's method of slipping through as a fake worker shattered the illusion of internal security. As a result, many airports introduced more robust internal verification systems, such as biometric authentication. Many airports now require biometric scans, fingerprints or facial recognition, not just for passengers, but for all staff entering restricted areas. Cross-department badging systems. Instead of isolated access systems, airports began linking security credentials across all departments to catch unauthorized movement between zones. Behavioral monitoring software. Advanced AI now flags unusual staff movement patterns, especially employees who cross into areas they don't belong in or stay beyond their scheduled shift hours. Routine background checks. Employees undergo more frequent security checks, and contractors face stricter clearance requirements. Vincent's case is now studied in law enforcement and aviation security training programs as a real-world example of social engineering, operational deception, and systemic vulnerability. Impact on criminal investigations. His escape also changed how prisons and law enforcement agencies handle high-risk, high-intellect criminals. France created a special task force focused on fugitives with advanced technological and psychological skills. Interpol also revised their cooperation protocols, accelerating data sharing between member countries when patterns suggest a single operator across multiple jurisdictions. Perhaps most importantly, Vincent Leclerc's story has become a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most secure systems are vulnerable not just to force, but to intelligence, patience, and psychological manipulation. He didn't break into safes or shoot his way out of prison. He simply thought faster and planned better than anyone else. And until he resurfaces, if he ever does, he remains a living legend in the criminal underworld and a nightmare for international law enforcement. The man who robbed the skies, vanished behind bars, and walked away from it all like a ghost.